Hey friends, just a quick video on how to get started. I think for many of us, there's the issue of, okay, this is a ginormous undertaking. Like, where do I even start, right? So hopefully there's some of you that are listening to me that actually have some work, some writing already done for chapters 1, 2, and maybe even potentially some for 3. If you haven't, that's fine. Don't panic, okay? Let's start with the very basics. Getting started, step 1. Have a look at the syllabus for this course to make sure you understand when everything is due, right? What I would recommend is immediately transferring those dates into a calendar that is yours, like in your phone or whatever, or your little date book or whatever like this. I would make sure to put it in there so you know exactly what's expected and when, right? What I would then do is take a little bit of time for personal reflection and metacognition, right? You know yourself and you know how much progress you have already made, right? That might be zero, and if that number's zero, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you need to be able to work backwards and say, okay, well, if chapter 3 is due on this particular date, I need to have started writing 3 weeks in advance or whatever, right? The difficulty with this course is there's a lot of things that are due where you can't write it the night before, right? In previous online courses you might have taken, you thought, you know what, it's due on Thursday, so I'll write it Wednesday night. Sure, I get it. I'm a lifelong procrastinator. I get it. With this, you cannot do that because you're talking about a chapter that's going to be between, say, 8 and 12 pages. And while you might be able to crank one of those out in one night, right? Some procrastinators are really good at that. It's not going to be the quality that's going to be useful for your thesis, right? It's not going to be useful 8 to 12 pages most likely. So what I would say is, okay, I know I've got 12 pages to write by, I'm just making up a date, the 22nd, right? So I need 3 weeks to write that well, right? So you'll start on the first or the second of the month and start building towards that page limit like this. And I'd be aware of the page limit. So if you think, okay, well, I've got 12 pages to write, that gives me, I can start 12 days in advance and only have to write 1 page a day. Easy. Like so. Some of us can write a full page in 10 minutes, right? But those little incremental steps, that's what you need to do as you plan out for this sort of writing, this sort of undertaking. And a mindset I want you to have, do me a favor and make sure you hear me well on this one, is, some of us like to sit down and write like so. And then other than some minor editing and some commas and whatever like this, we don't do a lot beyond that. We want to be able to put the ideas down and then now that sentence is crafted and I just have to polish it, right? Not in this case. This is going to be a writing endeavor where you write and then you might go back and be like, oh my gosh, that was terribly phrased. I have to rewrite a lot of that, right? That's fine. Get the ideas down. Do not focus on every sentence being perfectly crafted or every paragraph being perfectly constructed. Not the way this is done. Just get the ideas onto the paper in the computer. I mean, probably the computer, probably not writing this by hand. And then go back. Right? This is what we call an iterative process. So you write, you go back and review, rewrite, go back and review, rewrite, and so on and so forth. So don't expect to just sit down and be like, bam, chapter 1, perfect, right? That's not the name of the game. I know for many of you, I'm kind of pointing at you because a lot of grad students I've met, most in fact, have been perfectionists and they don't want to write something if it's not perfect, right? Write it and then we can build towards perfection, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. So make sure you get your dates down. Make sure you give yourself plenty of lead time. Make sure you're aware that this is not going to be perfect writing to begin with and we're going to require a lot of editing, right? I already posted a lecture on this, so hopefully you've viewed that one. If you've not viewed that lecture yet, go back and view it if you would, please. It's on outlining. Outline, outline, outline. I cannot emphasize enough how much you need to outline all 5 chapters, right? Because this is going to allow you to develop good continuity in your writing and know where you intend to go. With this is paper, especially because we're talking about 50 pages of content. It's really easy to be like, okay, I'll start writing, but I'm not sure where I want to take this. If you outline, you know where you're starting and you know where you intend to end up. And so all you have to do is essentially create this connection between the two, right? That's the importance of outlining in this case. Not really because you don't know what you're talking about or on a smaller paper, sometimes outlining seems redundant or a waste of time. I get it. But in a paper this size, it's real easy to be like, okay, how do I make the most linear route between where I want to start and where I want to end up? And the outline sets those parameters for you. So you know this is where we're starting, this is where we're ending. And then you get a better idea of, okay, what are the checkpoints in between? Where do I want to take the audience, the readers, in between the two? and what's the best way, and arguably the easiest way to get there, right? This way your paper doesn't end up going all over the place. And we've all been there where we're like, okay, I completely lost my train of thought. Why did I even bring this in, right? The outline is really going to help keep those kind of parameters, keep your writing in a linear fashion, okay? Another point I want to emphasize, make sure you keep track of all the sources that you intend to use. Even something you don't intend to use. If you think, oh, it doesn't really fit, I don't need it, I'll delete it. Keep it, just in case. From day one, and hopefully you did this with your writing in 6320. If not, once again, we can get around that. We can work on that. Make sure you start your reference page now. Anything that you use, anything that you cite has to go on that reference page, okay? And I don't know if all of you are aware of this. This is a point that I make in 6199. Everything that you cite has to be referenced, and everything you reference has to be cited, right? So what you want to make sure is that these have to perfectly match. Don't be like, oh, well, there was like 15 articles that I read that I didn't actually cite at all, so I put in my references, but they're not here. Your committee is going to look for that. Your committee wants to see that anything you referenced, you cited, anything you cited ended up in the reference page. So make sure you start that section now. And in fact, there's actually all sorts of good software you can use. I think even Microsoft Word does it now for you, where you can do APA formatted references, and it just kind of keeps track. I've even seen programs where if you go to cite something, it'll say, hey, do you want to include this reference? Or if you've got a reference, you just pick it out and it cites it for you. I mean, it's like legit. That's brilliant, right? So make sure you keep those in order. And then also what might help too, I find this helps some students, is as you're writing these chapters, start to put the pieces into your presentation that you're going to have to do for your proposal. And then later on, ultimately, for your defense, right? Copying and pasting out of your thesis into your proposal is not plagiarism. That's perfectly allowed, right? So why write something twice if you think, oh, that's a point I really need to make in my presentation? Move it over, all right? Start that PowerPoint file so it's already available. And as the pieces come along, be like, oh, that was really well written. I got to put that in there. I'll move it over. You don't have to make those sound effects. I don't know why I make sound effects for everything. Okay. The idea with this, what am I trying to emphasize? You might think, oh my God, he's rambling. Yes, I am. True story. I'm rambling. But what I want to point out is in just a moment of forethought in this work is going to save you so much effort on the back end, whether it be outlining or setting up your references well. This way, in the next class, just like a week before graduation, you're not scrambling to be like, oh my God, what was the website that I found that had that reference on it? Or what article? I don't remember Jones and Jones from 2002. Like, what am I using? If you have good planning, if you organize yourself well at the beginning, this can be a much more direct and streamlined process where you're not going to be scrambling, where you're not going to be pulling your hair out at the end trying to figure out what you meant by this or that, right? The point in this is, the overall point in this is constant progress through this will make your life so much better, right? So every day, even if you just look at it for a second, even if you just write a couple sentences, if it's been a hard day, you pop open a chapter and think, okay, I wanted to say that. Yeah, there we go. We made progress today, right? It's, as I've said in other lectures, this is like eating an elephant. It has to be done one bite at a time. All right. So every day, take a little nibble or take a big bite, depending on how much time and energy you've got. But every single day, revisit and just do some work on it. And it doesn't have to be in a linear fashion. I mentioned this in the outlining lecture. When you go to write, I would say open a new file for each of your 5 chapters. And when you're writing, don't feel like you have to write chapter 1 and be done before you move on to chapter 2. And then chapter 3 after you finish chapter 2. No. As the content comes to mind, as you're ready to write, drop it wherever chapter it goes. You might think, I'm going to work on the lit review for a little while today. And then the next day you're like, oh my gosh, I can't lit review at all today. I'll do methodology. Bam, 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 bam. You have these files already built and open and ready to go. So you can drop the information where you need to so there's the constant progress towards the end goal. Okay? And last thing I will say, I know I've said so much already, last thing I will say is you have to have a positive mindset. You can do this. God has brought you to this point. He will bring you through it, right? This will be challenging. This might arguably be the most challenging academic thing you've ever done. That's why many people don't do it. But you can, right? You can. And it's going to make your life easier if you follow these guidelines that I've just shared with you, and know that you have the faculty support and your committee support, my support. I love research, and I'd love to see you be successful with this. So make sure you plan well, and execute well, and before you know it, you'll have an excellent thesis.